The ML Sports Platter is back with you all over the major platforms, and it's brought to you by CH Insurance. They're in your corner every day, every way. Log on today to chinsurance.cc for personal and commercial insurance, group benefits, and a lot more. chinsurance.cc. Look who I brought onto the show, right? I mean, all these Twitter heads, right, thinking that there's a rivalry. No, we're buddies. We can talk sports. It's my man, Brent Axe from Syracuse.com. And, of course, you can get him on Twitter at Brent Axe Media and the podcast and everything he's doing. Brent, this is great. Welcome.
Thanks for having me. The supposed internet rivalry going on here, putting aside on the sports platter here. I'm excited to be on, my friend.
That's right. And listen, you can't be rivals when you have what you have in your background.
Yeah.
And I have this little person named Josh Allen on my show here. Okay, you can't be rivals.
Fantastic. The memories are flowing. My daughter's in college now, but when she was that age, man, little people were big.
No doubt about it. Yeah. Speaking of memories, when I started in radio, you had just gotten to WHEN, and we were teammates in radio at first. That was 22 years ago. Things are rolling.
Stop. Just stop making me feel old. I already noticed a few more gray hairs this morning, and you gotta bring that.
Well, the other day, my daughter actually said something like, "Oh, Dada, just take your hat off," because I'm at the other side. You have a kid in college. I'm a 4.5-year-old and a 1-year-old, so I'm just getting going. And I know we talk at the games all the time about this. And my kid goes, "Well, Dada, just take your hat off. You know, you're old. You're bald. You're a bald guy." That's what she said.
Don't you love how kids just give it to you straight, man?
Yeah, it's okay, though. I'm fine with it. All right.
Absolutely.
Speaking of giving it to people straight, that's what you and I are going to try to do here with Syracuse football first. We'll see if I feel like a Bills question at the end. I might be exhausted. But let's start with the first game, right? I mean, they beat Ohio. I know it was a slow start, but Brent, transfer kids coming in, new coach, new coordinators, new quarterback, new system, new seats, maybe some new fans. Everything was new. You can't, just because all these things look great, you don't snap a finger and win 40-0. This isn't the 1990s Cowboys here. So I thought overall it was really, really good. They took control of 2 quarters, and now you just move on. So give me your quick takeaways against Ohio, and then going into Georgia Tech, a team that I think is going to present a lot of difficulties for Syracuse.
Yeah, I think you bring up a great point. There's no preseason in college football, and now with the transfer portal, you just don't know how things are going to look. They practiced against themselves all through spring and for 3.5 weeks in camp. The offense looked pretty darn good, and Kyle McCord's like, "Hey, look at this. I've got OG, and I've got Trevor Pena and Jackson Meeks and Zede Haynes, and he's got too many options out there, right?" So for McCord to establish that kind of chemistry that quick, I think was incredible. And it just shows you give him a little bit of time to throw the football, and he's going to find some lanes to do it. And Mike, we heard so much last year from this coaching staff. OG obviously is a first-round talent potentially and speaks for himself. But a number of coaches told us last year, like, guys, don't discount Trevor Pena not being in this offense. And they really hyped him up. So at least through one game, we're seeing what they missed there. The defensive line, I think that's the other big takeaway, right, is Syracuse gave up a little more on the ground than you would expect against Ohio, but I don't think they were ready for Northwestern transfer Anthony Tyus III to come in there and run all over him. I think they were preparing for other people, frankly. But the biggest question I had coming out of camp was the defensive line. And Nick Williams, the edge coach, and Elijah Robinson and Fran Brown had said, I know you had E-Rob here on your pod, so I wonder what he said about this, but they were going to rotate a lot of guys anyway, which tells me they weren't sure what their rotation is. I love how coaches spin this stuff like, "Oh no, we don't have first and second teams. We've got a collective." It's like, no, you're not sure who your starting defensive line is. So I think this week against Ohio, you lock it down a little bit, you find your best 6 or so and rotate them to slow down Georgia Tech, which I think is the good news in this, Mike. Syracuse playing a team like Ohio that had a good running game and a mobile quarterback and Parker Navarro get you ready for Georgia Tech, as opposed to if you munched on a cupcake and, aren't ready for the power running game that Georgia Tech is going to bring into the mix. And I'll say this, I'm not discounting anything here, but how much of the shine of Georgia Tech's win over Florida State is off a little bit that we've seen the Seminoles are, let's just say, having their troubles.
Well, yeah, I mean, that goes both ways because I think a lot of people thought Georgia Tech would come down and then they steamrolled Georgia State. They have complementary football, 64 snaps in that game. They went 30-34 on the run pass. And listen, Haynes King's really, really good. And I think it's crazy because, it's easy to say, I know I saw your tweet too, but, bring Florida State Clemson back on the schedule. Come on, can we get them back? But we know sports are cyclical by the same token. So what teams now are going to go, okay, this would be like Duke and Carolina being down in hoops. What teams are going to go up and grab it now, right? Is it Va-Tech and Miami? Is it going to be a Georgia Tech and NC State? Like, what couple of teams are going to go up and take it? I will say, though, Fidel Diggs played a little bit of that linebacker. You saw him move in, which leads me to Marlo Wax. That defense, Brent, they've got to figure it out right away. Because I think if they don't contain, I'm not saying to shut them completely down, but if they allow Georgia Tech to go between running backs and quarterback without Marlowe Wax, and it turns into Earl Campbell, Jim Brown, and Walter Payton, and Randall Cunningham at once, Cuse is going to be in trouble Saturday.
Yeah, they have to figure that out because Marlowe Wax, so the last 2 years he's been your leading tackler. He is the leader on that defense, literally in the sense that he's got the radio in his helmet. He calls out the defense. He's the spiritual leader of that defense. And remember, came back to try and shore up what we think is going to be an NFL career, and he's got to think about that now. So he's out 6 weeks, right? So I'm not a doctor. I just play one on a podcast here. But what's a 6-week injury that it's not like he comes out of that clean. So when he comes back in that time frame, if he does, Mike, that's the Pitt game, which is out of a bye on a Thursday night. So you might get him back for the stretch run, which Syracuse is going to need. Look at Boston College is in that stretch run, and Virginia Tech and Miami. Like, they're going to need him back. So in the meantime, how do you replace him? Well, I think Fran Brown was honest about that yesterday. You don't just pop a guy in there. You're going to need James Hurd, who's a transfer. You're going to need Anwar Sparrow, and you're going to need Justin Barron to be, remember, he's in that star role now, which is kind of a linebacker secondary hybrid. And let's be honest here, Barron did not have a good game against Ohio. He had a couple bad penalties and just not himself in that game. Justin Barron will be fine. He's a great player for a reason, but he has to really step up too. So that's 3 guys essentially that's going to be playing the role of one in Marlo Wax. That's a big loss. And so when you're playing a team like Georgia Tech, you're going to need somebody. It could be Diggs, as you mentioned. You're going to need somebody to keep a hawk eye on Haynes King because that guy uses every millisecond of the snap. You cannot let up on him or he's going to make a play. So that might take Diggs out of the pass rush, and now other people have to step up there. So you mentioned the cyclical effect. You pull one peg out of the Jenga tower, now the whole thing starts to shake a little bit, and Marlowe was the main peg in that tower for Syracuse.
No doubt. Brent Axe with us here on the ML Sports Platter, brought to you by CH Insurance in your corner every day, every way. You can get Brent on Twitter at Brent Axe Media, up over 34K on Twitter now, I believe, on the X. They changed it to X, I think, for you, right, Brent? You were at
I think so. Yeah. Elon and I talked about it. I said, you just got to simplify this thing.
Quick little text. Well, apparently you and I couldn't text until this past weekend at the Dome. I have no idea why. Brent said, did you block me? I don't know. I don't think I blocked you. I have maybe a couple other people blocked, but not Brent. But you can get him on the X, Twitter, whatever they're calling it now, and Syracuse.com, the pod, the whole thing. And we're going to allow Brent to plug some of that stuff at the end. Fran Brown and Syracuse. This is all obviously brand new. And as I mentioned, you can't just, and it works and we're done and go off to the college football playoff like Nick Saban says. It all has to gel together. But the guy at the top is Fran Brown. Mm-hmm. What do you personally like the most about him, the guy? I mean, we still have to wait if he's there as the HC, because after all, he jumped from a secondary coaching role, which is a specialty, to 2 levels, not coordinator to head, but specialty to head. That's 2 jumps. But as a guy in the press room, the community stuff, all this, and maybe I'm just giving the answer right now, but do you like something that jumps out, right away about this guy? Because when I see him, I listen to him, and I haven't had him on yet, you just go, he's real. That's what I say. I don't think there's any bullshit.
I think you're right about that. And look, we've only known him for 9 months, but everybody I've talked to, from people in the community, recruits, coaches, people that have dealt with him in the past, like normally, so somebody signs up in whatever position it is, and you hear things, right? Somebody gets in touch, like, oh, that's not the real guy, something like that, right? Not one person has said that to me, right? Now, again, we're in the early stages here, and we'll see how this thing goes. But Fran is he's not direct like a stand-up comedian would be to call you out, but he will tell you what's on his mind. And I'll give you an example. So the past couple of press conferences, Fran has been in there and he's been asked about Georgia Tech and other things. Maybe he's fallen into coach speak mode. I don't know. But he was like, you know what? I can't worry about that because I'm worried about today. I'm worried about Monday. Like, what's the most coach thing you can say? But I actually believe him when he says that. Like, I actually believe certain things. And he even brought it up in the press. He's like, guys, I'm sorry. I'm just going to be boring on some of these things. I'm so concerned about Saturday. I can't think about the next game yet. Like, I'm thinking about today and what we got to clean up in practice. And Mike, he's not the loudest guy in the room, right? He's not Scott Schaefer banging podiums. He's not Dino Babers, who, was boisterous and made movie references and did have some fun before, things went south at the end.
Close your eyes. Yep.
Close your eyes, right? Fran just walks in the room, doesn't have to be the loudest guy in the room, doesn't have to be the smartest guy in the room, but man, you walk out of there like, that guy, I want to play for that guy. There's just something about that genuine connection that he makes with you. And man, he knows his stuff. Yeah. And when he looks you in the eye and tells you this is what you're going to be and this is what you got to do, like he's just somebody you believe, right? And I can see why all these recruits walk away from that conversation from Fran like, man, that guy is real. And it goes to show you that the thing that's really impressed me, Mike, is, I have a daughter who's going to be 18 soon and in that generation. And I have a chance to teach up at SU now for a few weeks every semester. And people really dump on, and we're just getting old. So we're like, oh, those whippersnappers, those youngsters. But kids that age do want to be coached. They do want discipline. They do want to get better, right? So I think Fran has found a way to connect with that generation, but also keep in mind the things that you have to embrace now in college sports, NIL and the portal, and how you balance those two things. Whereas when Dino was asked about it, I asked the question at the press conference last year, and I wasn't even asking about NIL. I was asking about depth. Is literally what's your depth like here halfway through the season? And Dino at that press conference, you could tell it just kind of had it. And he's like, we don't have any depth because it all gets bought away, right? Whereas Fran, you mentioned the community events, not just community events in terms of, charity. Like he's going to community events with boosters. He is talking to the money people. He's saying, hey, we need you. He wants the alums around. That's another major mistake that Dino made. Like, why wouldn't you want your former players around with the history that Syracuse football has? Fran has said, come on back. And he's not asking for their money. He's like, eventually maybe you'll feel like giving us some money. We just want you here. Right. So look, he's checked every box so far and it's been pretty impressive.
No doubt about it. My favorite thing that he said so far was after the Ohio game when he was asked about the, being in the tunnel and running out. He said something like, I had butterflies. I was nervous. And I was talking to my wife about it. And I was like, thank you. Yeah. Somebody said it as opposed to the whole, it's just another game. And it's not another game. No. It's his first game as a head coach, Yeah. It's like when the big free agent hits the podium in New York. Oh, I love being a Yankee fan when I was a little boy. Well, no, they gave you $300-something million. You know what I mean? So I thought that answer was awesome. Again, Brent Axe with us talking some SU football. I told you 10 to 12 minutes, but I completely lied. I'm going to hold you another 5 minutes.
Yeah, as long as you want.
And I'll just, I don't know, give you a burger from the Allen Angus pub or something. I'm sure you're totally down.
Deal.
I got one more Cuse and quick bills, and then I want to have you guys plug your thing. Syracuse, I thought going into this year, gosh, if they go 9-3, doesn't that seem like it's just a little too great with everything? But 7-5, I don't know if that's enough because of what's going on. So I met myself in the middle, and I went 8-4. What say you?
I have 8-4 blinking in my head too, because we saw it in the Ohio game. Now that's game one, and the adversity you have in game one is different than the adversity you have in game 7, so to say. But the thing we're starting to see come to fruition, I'm joking around on Twitter that this is the year they don't have Florida State and Clemson on the schedule. You want Florida State. Maybe not so much. Clemson's still pretty good. I know they got trucked by Georgia, but a lot of teams get trucked by Georgia. But from the beginning, Mike, I never bought into this Syracuse has an easy schedule thing, right? Because of the nature of the ACC You still have Virginia Tech and Miami late in the year. I know Virginia Tech lost to Vanderbilt. I still think that's going to be a tough game, but those are both at home. Syracuse starts indoors for 5 straight weeks, 4 at the Dome, then they go to Vegas to play UNLV, right? There are parts of the schedule that are tough. I think that NC State game at Carter Finley is going to be hard. I think you got these random, you got to go to Cal in the middle of November. Could that be a road trip that kind of throws you off? Friday night game, Thursday night game, weird situation. So it's not a easy schedule. It's not a hard schedule. It's kind of somewhere right in the middle. But I feel like there's a couple games you're going to stub your toe because of the things that maybe Syracuse hasn't quite figured out. The other thing I would say is that's the record that blinks in my head. I think what's more important is how does it look? Like if they're 8-4, but they lost 3 of those games by less than a touchdown, and it came down to the last possession. Like, how does it look? Are you losing 45-10 or are you losing 45-38 kind of thing? So if they look competitive and they look like a football team, which I know that's the simplest thing I can say, but people have asked me throughout training camp and now into the season, like, hey, how do they look? We've been at practice and seen some things behind the scenes. And I'm like because there's been years where I look and I'm like, yeah, maybe that doesn't look like that. That position needs. They have depth, they have size, they have speed in the portal and recruiting. And let's face it, Fran brought in a couple instant recruits that were on the field against Ohio. You've seen Willis and Marcellus Barnes Jr. and a couple other guys we can mention. So that's my long-winded way of saying 8-4, no matter what, would look great. And if I know last year was last year and this year is this year, but if last year's MASH unit with Dan Villari running whatever 1940s offense that was at the end of the year can win 6.
Yeah.
This team can win 8. This team built the way it is with the new coaches and the new players and everything, with all the things that come in football, injuries, which we've already seen, and all that stuff that we have to attach to this conversation. Yeah, I feel like it's an 8-win team. Now, if they're 7-5, what did that look like? What were those losses? What happened? Did you have another major injury or something that factored into that? And this into existence, I'll knock on wood as I say it, but look, you got to acknowledge it. Kyle McCord goes down. This team's in trouble.
Oh, yeah.
The backup quarterback is just not up to where it needs to be. And I think we saw that on Saturday, how good McCord is. And let's face it, in the last 10 years, the backup quarterback, one way or the other, gets on the field for Syracuse. So I hope that's not the case. But you got to be real about these things. Certain injuries could bring this thing down.
Yeah, depth, I think, is the big one. I think that's the one where Dino and Schaefer's teams down at the end, they start losing a couple guys here and there. Loss, and you can't stop it. It goes down, the mistakes, the penalties, plus the depth problems. I think all of that maybe can get shored up. And yeah, I mean, in the schedule, I'm with you. I mean, plus it's sports, man. You can't predict
exactly.
anything. Yeah. You can have the easiest schedule in the world, for crying out loud. Why is this year going to be different for the Bills, especially in the playoffs?
It's not. I just don't see it. I'm trying not to be negative Nelly here. I love the Bills. One of the great things about what I get to do now is when you cover Syracuse, like it kind of beats the fan out of you, right? Like I grew up here and I always want Syracuse to do well for the fan base and the community, but I can't root for Syracuse. I have to look at it objectively, right? The Bills, that's my team, man. I am a fan all the way. I used to work for the Bills radio network, and even then I was still, ranting on Twitter about this team. But I don't see anything different that makes me say, this team, this is the one that's going to beat Kansas City. Because that's what Brandon Beane should have an unhealthy obsession with. How do I beat Kansas City? And I'll tell you how you don't beat Kansas City. Don't make a trade with them on draft night, okay? And some people were like, well, maybe they would have got Xavier Worthy anyway. Fine. Don't be the team that bridges the gap for Kansas City to get there.
Because in case something great happens, it's going to come back to that. If they
100%.
beat you again and again and again and again. If something grand happens, you help them do it.
My problem, Mike, is I think the Bills are counting on, and what a great problem to have when you have one of the 2 best quarterbacks in football. Mm-hmm. But I think they're counting too much. And Josh will figure it out.
Again,
Dalton Kincaid, great. He will make Shakir, he'll elevate a lot of good receivers to great. I love Keon Coleman. Coleman was my guy all the way who I wanted the Bills to get, but I think there's a little bit too much pressure on him. Now, I could be dead wrong about this. They could come out and just be gangbusters here, but I feel like all the changes, how does that new secondary work in? You've already lost Milano, which is just a huge loss for this team. Don't get me wrong. That's a 10-11 win team. The Jets will find a way to be the Jets. Miami will find a way to fade at the end, as they always do. The Bills still win the division, in my opinion. But I have a heat-seeking missile focus on, is this a Super Bowl team? And I keep looking at it, and I'm like, I don't think so. So I love being a spoiled Bills fan that I can say that. But you know this as well as anybody, Mike. There's only a short window in the National Football League where you can legitimately walk into a year and say, I expect to go to the Super Bowl. The last couple of years, I felt that way. This year, I'm a little short of that.
And then I guess the final thing, Brent, I wanted to have you do is just, tell the people out there about, the text group and some of the other things that you have going on. Your whole platform nowadays, it's so many things that kind of roll, and there's so much content and so much stuff that's out there, but kind of clear the way where people can, jump on board with you guys over there and Chris and the gang too.
I appreciate you saying that. So yeah, there's good old fashioned columns that we write on Syracuse.com. Check that out. Syracuse Sports Podcast on all the formats, Spotify, Apple, YouTube. Love doing the pod itself, but Emily Leiker and I from Syracuse.com, we do a post-game show after every Syracuse football game live on all those platforms. So please check that out. And we've got this really cool thing going now called Syracuse Sports Insiders. And what it is you get to text me directly, and I text you. So it's not a group text, right?
No blocking.
No blocking. No, don't be blocking now. Come on. You got to, I mean, if you're paying $3.99 a month to block somebody, I don't know what to tell you there. But The cool thing is you can try it free for a couple weeks, and then it's just $3.99 a month after that. And it's, you text me anytime, I text you, you get exclusive news access. The only people we respond to on the podcast are our Syracuse Sports Insiders. We don't respond to Twitter or anything else. So you get that exclusive access as well. And it's been great. Our insiders, and we just kind of have a free-flowing conversation, questions that you want me to ask Fran Brown and players, and just anything you can think of, really, shoot me a text. It's been a great thing. And to join, all you have to do is text ORANGE to 315-847-3895.
That's easy. And I know Matt and Ryan are doing that with the Bills too.
That's right. Yeah.
People really love to do that. Can I throw you a curveball to end this?
Of course you can.
In your media career, you've gone up, you've gone down, just like me. We've both been fired. Everybody loses jobs. We've pretty much seen it all at this point because we're old. We've been doing this for a long enough time. If you had one mulligan in your media career, where do you take it?
Oh, boy. That's a hell of a question. I don't think I have one, to be honest with you. I mean,
do it exactly the same.
I would because it shapes you in life, and, all those lessons that you learn. And like you said, we're old now, so I have the opportunity to give advice and to teach students at Syracuse, to teach, my daughter how to go ahead in life. And I think, those lessons that have come up and the adversity that has come up. Now, I would certainly want things to go a different way and not get fired the way that I did a couple of times. And I mean but that's just life. That's out of your hands. And it's one of the hardest lessons to learn is some of this shit is just out of your hands and you have to deal with it. But I'll say this, Mike, as a kid, the only thing I ever wanted to do was talk sports in Syracuse, New York. And I get to do that every single day. I had the opportunity to work for the Buffalo Bills radio network for 3 years. The Bills stunk those 3 years. Don't get me wrong. Not you kids getting used to the Bills going to the playoffs every year. Let me introduce you to a 17-year playoff drought that Mike and I went through as Bills fans.
Hey, but they were in the hunt a couple times at the end.
In the hunt, exactly. But still, I worked on an NFL broadcast team for 3 years. Yeah. And look, I have had opportunities to go to bigger markets. I worked for Sirius XM for a little bit. I was up for a job at Sirius XM that I almost got. And I don't know. I don't know if I would have enjoyed that as much as I enjoy the connection that I make where I grew up with my people, right? So I really don't have a regret like, oh, I didn't chase that job or I didn't do this. The regrets that I have were not my choices. So I can live with that.
I like that answer. I think if somebody asked me where my mulligan, I would have begged for my mulligan to be getting hoaxed, by Derek Jeter instead of Shane Spencer.
Yeah, that would have been better. Yeah.
No big deal. Well, look, this was a blast, obviously. Knew it would be. My old friend, not old in that way, but my old buddy Brent Axe from our
You can
radio
call me
station.
old. It's okay.
That's
old.
okay. All right. Well,
That's all right.
Syracuse.com columnists, catch them all over those platforms. Subscribe to the text group as well, and go get them on X at Brent Axe Media. That's hard to do on X at Brent Axe Media. That's I don't want to say that 10 times, but I'll see you at the Dome this week. And hey, man, I'd love to have you back. All right.
Anytime, Mike. Thanks for having me, man.
All right.